What would you do if a 10-year-old child walked up to you and claimed he could save your biggest performance? Would you laugh? Would you listen? Or would you do something that would haunt you forever? The summer sun blazed over Harmony Grove Festival, painting the sprawling grounds in golden light. Thousands of music lovers filled the air with laughter and anticipation. Food trucks lined the pathways, their savory aromas mixing with the distant sound of guitars being tuned. Children ran between the stages with painted faces, while families spread blankets on the grass, waiting for the evening's main event. But in the heart of all this joy stood a small figure who seemed out of place among the sea of festival-goers. Ethan Weaver, just 10 years old, clutched his grandmother's weathered hand as they navigated through the crowd. His clothes were clean but clearly hand-me-downs, his sneakers worn thin from countless walks to school. Yet his eyes sparkled with something that money couldn't buy: pure, undiluted passion. Lily Weaver, his 68-year-old grandmother, moved slowly beside him. Her uniform from the office building she cleaned was carefully folded in her bag, replaced by her best Sunday dress for this special day. She had saved for months, working extra shifts, just to bring Ethan to this festival. She knew how much music meant to him, how he would sit for hours at the old, donated piano in their tiny apartment, creating melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep within his soul. The main stage loomed ahead like a mountain of dreams. Starlight Echoes, the headlining band, was scheduled to perform in just 3 hours. Ethan had listened to their music countless times on his grandmother's old radio, learning every note, every rhythm. He had even transcribed their songs by ear, filling notebook after notebook with musical notations that most adults couldn't understand. As they approached the backstage area, Ethan's heart began to race. This was his moment, his chance to show the world what he could do. He had practiced for this day in his mind 1,000 times, imagining himself on that stage, his fingers dancing across the keys while thousands cheered. But reality hit him like a cold wave when they reached the security barrier. "Sorry, kid," the guard said without looking up from his clipboard. "No fans allowed backstage." Ethan's grandmother stepped forward, her voice gentle but determined. "Please, sir. My grandson, he plays piano. The band, they might need him." The guard finally looked at them, his eyes scanning their modest appearance with barely concealed dismissal. "Look, lady, I'm sure the kid's talented, but this is a professional venue. These musicians have been doing this for years." Just then, chaos erupted from behind the barrier. Voices raised in panic, people running back and forth. Someone shouted about an emergency, about the show being cancelled. Ethan's keen ears picked up fragments of conversation. Their pianist was sick, food poisoning, no replacement available. This was it. This was his chance. Ethan slipped under the barrier before anyone could stop him, his small frame allowing him to weave between the panicking crew members. His grandmother called after him, but he was already running toward the sound of distressed voices. He found them gathered around a tall man with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes, Vincent Sterling, the lead singer of Starlight Echoes. Vincent was on his phone, his face red with frustration. "I don't care what it costs," Vincent was saying. "Fly someone in from anywhere. We cannot cancel this show." Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling?" Vincent turned, his expression shifting from frustration to confusion to something much colder. "Who let this kid back here?" "Security." "Wait," Ethan said quickly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I heard your pianist is sick. I can play your songs. All of them. I know every note." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Vincent Sterling began to laugh. It wasn't a kind laugh or even a dismissive chuckle. It was cruel, cutting through the air like a blade. "You." Vincent gestured at Ethan from head to toe. "A kid who probably can't even reach the pedals wants to play with Starlight Echoes? On the main stage? In front of 20,000 people?" The other band members shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he stood his ground. "I can show you," he said simply. "Just give me 5 minutes." Vincent's laugh grew louder, attracting more attention from the crew. "This is rich. Kid, do you know how long it takes to master what we do? Years. Decades. And you think you can just walk in here with your—" He paused, his eyes scanning Ethan's appearance again. "Your situation and play with professionals?" Ethan's grandmother had finally caught up, slightly out of breath. She moved to stand beside her grandson, her presence both protective and proud. "The boy has a gift," she said quietly. "A gift." Vincent's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Lady, gifts don't pay for years of training, expensive instruments, or professional experience. Your grandson might be cute banging on whatever broken piano you have at home, but this is the real world." The cruelty in his words hit harder than any physical blow. Ethan felt his grandmother's hand tighten on his shoulder, felt the stares of everyone around them. But instead of crying or running away, something sparked inside him. A fire that had been building his entire young life. "You're right," Ethan said, his voice growing stronger. "I don't have expensive instruments or fancy training. But music isn't about what you have. It's about what you feel, what you can share with people. And I can make them feel something you never could." Vincent's expression darkened. "Get this kid out of here before I call the police. And make sure he doesn't come back." As security moved toward them, Ethan looked up at his grandmother. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with something else. A fierce pride that seemed to shine brighter than all the stage lights combined. They were escorted away from the backstage area, past the barrier, back into the crowd of festival-goers who had no idea what had just transpired. Ethan's dream seemed to shatter with each step away from that stage. But sometimes, the universe has other plans. As they walked past a small warm-up tent where lesser-known artists practiced, Ethan heard something that made him stop. An old upright piano sat abandoned in the corner, its bench empty, waiting. His grandmother saw where he was looking and squeezed his hand gently. "Show them, baby," she whispered. "Show them all." Ethan walked to that piano, sat down on the worn bench, and placed his small hands on the keys. He didn't play one of Starlight Echo's songs. Instead, he played something from his heart, something that had been growing inside him through every rejection, every doubt, every moment when people looked at him and saw only what he lacked instead of what he possessed. The melody flowed from his fingertips like water from a spring, pure and unstoppable. It started soft, almost hesitant, then grew into something magnificent. Notes cascaded and danced, telling a story without words, a story of dreams deferred but not destroyed, of talent that couldn't be contained by circumstances or prejudice. One by one, people began to stop and listen. The tent filled with an audience that Vincent Sterling would never understand, people who recognized truth when they heard it, who understood that real music comes not from expensive instruments or perfect clothes, but from the soul of someone who has something genuine to say. And in the back of that growing crowd, someone held up a phone, recording every note, every moment of pure magic happening in that little tent. What happened next would change everything. Sometimes a single moment can change not just one life, but millions. Sometimes justice comes not from those in power, but from ordinary people who refuse to stay silent. Nina Blake was just 17, a journalism student volunteering at the festival to build her portfolio. She had been following Starlight Echoes around with her camera, hoping to catch some behind-the-scenes footage for her school project. What she captured instead would shake the music world to its core. Her phone had been recording when Vincent Sterling unleashed his cruel words on young Ethan. Every mocking laugh, every dismissive gesture, every moment of heartless rejection was preserved in crystal-clear detail. But Nina didn't stop there. Something told her to follow the small boy and his grandmother as they walked away in defeat. When Ethan sat down at that old piano in the practice tent and began to play, Nina felt goosebumps rise on her arms. She had covered dozens of musicians for her school paper, but she had never heard anything like this. The music seemed to reach into her chest and squeeze her heart, telling a story more powerful than any words could express. As the crowd grew around Ethan, Nina made a decision that would change everything. She posted the video to every social media platform she could think of, with a caption that burned with righteous anger. This is what happens when talent meets prejudice. 10-year-old Ethan was humiliated by Starlight Echo's lead singer for wanting to help save their show. Then he played this. The world needs to see what real music sounds like. The response was immediate and explosive. Within an hour, the video had been shared 1,000 times. Within 6 hours, it had reached 1 million views. By midnight, the number was climbing toward 10 million, and the #LetEthanPlay was trending worldwide. Comments poured in from every corner of the globe. Professional musicians shared their outrage. Music teachers posted about their own students who faced similar barriers. Parents wrote about the importance of encouraging young talent regardless of background. The story had touched something universal: the pain of being dismissed, the power of perseverance, and the beauty of raw, authentic talent. But it wasn't just ordinary people who were paying attention. Isabella Vega, the Grammy-winning pianist whose fingers had graced stages from Carnegie Hall to the Sydney Opera House, was having her morning coffee in her Los Angeles home when her assistant showed her the video. Isabella had grown up poor in East LA, her own talent discovered by accident when she wandered into a community center as a child. She watched Ethan's performance 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Within minutes, she was on the phone with her manager. "Cancel everything for tomorrow," she said. "I need to get to Harmony Grove Festival." Across the country in New York, Theo Ellis was in his modest apartment, the walls covered with faded photographs from his glory days as one of jazz's most celebrated pianists. At 79, his hands were too arthritic to play professionally anymore, but his ear was still perfect. When his great niece showed him the video, Theo closed his eyes and listened. When the music ended, he opened them with a spark that hadn't been there in years. "Get me a ticket to that festival," he told her. "There's a boy there who needs to know he's not alone." Meanwhile, Vincent Sterling was experiencing a very different kind of attention. The video of his cruel treatment of Ethan had been isolated and was spreading just as rapidly as the performance footage. Music blogs were calling him everything from heartless to the face of everything wrong with the industry. Radio stations were pulling Starlight Echo's songs from their playlists. Venues were canceling upcoming concerts. His phone rang constantly, his manager, his publicist, his record label, all delivering the same message. His career was in free fall. But Vincent's problems were just beginning, because the story had caught the attention of someone who could do more than just comment online. Marcus Chen had built his social media empire by calling out injustice wherever he found it. With 30 million followers across all platforms, his voice could start movements and careers and change lives. When he saw the video of Ethan's treatment, he didn't just share it, he launched a campaign. "This is bigger than one festival," Marcus posted in a video that immediately went viral. "This is about every kid who's been told they're not good enough because of how they look, where they come from, or what they don't have." Vincent Sterling just became the face of a system that crushes dreams before they have a chance to bloom. But you know what? We're going to change that system, starting right now. The pressure became unbearable. Sponsors pulled out of Starlight Echo's tour. Their record label issued a statement distancing themselves from Vincent's actions. Band members began receiving offers to join other groups, effectively being given escape routes from the sinking ship. By the second day after the video went viral, Vincent Sterling was facing a choice: destroy his career entirely or find a way to make this right. But the most powerful response came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Williams had been the principal of Lincoln Elementary School for 15 years. She had watched countless talented children slip through the cracks because the world wasn't ready to see their potential. When she saw Ethan's video, she didn't just share it, she started making phone calls. Within 48 hours, she had organized something unprecedented: a coalition of music educators, child advocates, and industry professionals demanding that the festival give Ethan the chance he deserved. But they didn't stop there. they announced the creation of the Ethan Weaver Music Access Fund, a scholarship program for underprivileged children with musical talent. The fund raised $50,000 in its first day. Meanwhile, back at the festival, Ethan had no idea that his 30-minute performance in a practice tent had started a global movement. He and his grandmother had returned to their modest hotel room, where Lily tried to comfort her heartbroken grandson. "Maybe we should go home," Ethan said quietly, staring out the window at the festival grounds where his dreams had been crushed. "No, baby," his grandmother replied, though her own heart was breaking. "We paid for 2 days and we're staying 2 days. Sometimes the best things come when we least expect them." She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be, because at that very moment, Isabella Vega was landing at the local airport. Theo Ellis was checking into the hotel next door. And Vincent Sterling was staring at his phone, watching his world crumble one comment, one share, one angry review at a time. The boy who had been dismissed as unworthy was about to discover that sometimes the whole world is listening, and sometimes justice comes in ways we never could have imagined. The festival's second day was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. What happens when a man who destroyed a child's dreams is forced to face the consequences? What happens when talent refuses to be silenced, and the whole world is watching? The morning of the festival's final day dawned with an electricity in the air that had nothing to do with the weather. Word had spread like wildfire that something extraordinary was about to happen. The video of Ethan's treatment and his incredible performance had now been viewed over 50 million times. #LetEthanPlay wasn't just trending, it had become a battle cry for justice. Vincent Sterling sat in his trailer, staring at his phone with trembling hands. His social media accounts had been flooded with millions of angry comments. His career was in ruins. 3 band members had already quit. His record label had dropped him. Venues across the country were canceling shows. But it was the knock on his trailer door that made his blood run cold. Festival director James Morrison stood outside with a grim expression, flanked by 2 people Vincent recognized from the viral video coverage, Isabella Vega and an elderly black man with wise eyes who seemed to look right through him. "Vincent," James said simply, "we need to talk." Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the hotel restaurant with his grandmother, picking at his breakfast. Despite Lily's encouragement to stay another day, the boy's spirit seemed broken. The cruel laughter still echoed in his mind, the dismissive words still stung his heart. Ethan Weaver? They looked up to see an elegant woman with kind eyes approaching their table. Behind her stood the elderly gentleman from Vincent's trailer, moving slowly but with unmistakable dignity. "My name is Isabella Vega," she said gently, sitting down beside them. "And this is Mr. Theo Ellis. We've come a very long way to meet you." Ethan's grandmother nearly choked on her coffee. She recognized these names, legends of the music world, artists she had only heard on old records and seen in magazines. "We saw your video," Theo said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. "Son, in my 79 years on this earth, in all my time playing in smoky clubs and grand concert halls, I have rarely heard anything as pure and powerful as what you played in that tent." Tears began to well in Ethan's eyes. After all the rejection and humiliation, here were 2 of the greatest musicians alive telling him his music mattered. "But more than that," Isabella continued, "we're here because what happened to you was wrong. Dead wrong. And we're going to make sure the whole world knows it." Back at the main stage, something unprecedented was happening. Word had leaked that Isabella Vega and Theo Ellis were at the festival, and thousands of people were gathering, not for Starlight Echoes, but in solidarity with a 10-year-old boy who had been treated with cruelty. The pressure on Vincent had become unbearable. His remaining band members had delivered an ultimatum, make this right, or they were walking away too. His manager had been blunt, fix this, or your career is over forever. But it was James Morrison who delivered the final blow. "Vincent, I've been running festivals for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. You have 2 choices. You can skulk away in shame and let this destroy everything you've worked for, or you can do the right thing. But understand this, if you choose to do nothing, Starlight Echoes will never perform at another festival I'm involved with. And trust me, my influence reaches far beyond this event. The ultimatum was clear. Vincent Sterling, the man who had mocked a child's dreams, was about to face the consequences of his cruelty. An hour before the scheduled evening performance, festival security found Ethan and his grandmother in the hotel lobby and escorted them backstage. But this time, they weren't being rejected, they were being invited. Vincent Sterling stood waiting, but he was no longer the arrogant superstar who had laughed at a child's dreams. His expensive clothes couldn't hide the defeat in his posture, the shame in his eyes. "Ethan," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you an apology that no words can truly capture. What I did to you was unforgivable. I let my pride, my prejudice, my own insecurities turn me into someone I don't recognize. You offered to help save our show, and I treated you with cruelty that no child should ever experience." The backstage area had gone completely silent. Crew members, other performers, festival staff, everyone had stopped to witness this moment. "But apologizing isn't enough," Vincent continued, his voice growing stronger. "I want to invite you to open our show tonight. This stage, these 20,000 people, they should hear what real talent sounds like." Ethan looked up at his grandmother, then at Isabella and Theo, who had become his guardians and advocates. The fear was still there, but something else was growing stronger, the unshakable knowledge that he belonged on that stage. "I'll do it," he said simply. What happened next became the stuff of legend. As the sun set over Harmony Grove Festival, a small boy walked onto the main stage to the sound of thunderous applause. 20,000 people rose to their feet before he even touched the keys. The energy was electric, charged with emotion and anticipation. Ethan sat at the grand piano, an instrument far finer than anything he had ever touched. For a moment, the sheer magnitude of the moment threatened to overwhelm him. But then he remembered his grandmother's words, Isabella's encouragement, Theo's wisdom. He began to play. The music that flowed from his fingertips was transcendent. It started with a gentle melody that seemed to float over the crowd like a prayer, then built into something magnificent and powerful. He wove together jazz, classical, gospel, and something entirely his own, a sound that spoke to every heart in that vast audience. But the real magic happened when Isabella Vega walked onto the stage and sat at a second piano. Together, the 10-year-old boy and the Grammy-winning legend created music that seemed to come from heaven itself. The crowd was mesmerized, many openly weeping at the beauty of what they were witnessing. When the music ended, the silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into the longest standing ovation in the festival's history. People were crying, cheering, holding their children up to see the boy who had refused to let rejection destroy his dreams. But Ethan's night wasn't over. Vincent Sterling took the microphone with tears streaming down his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed something I almost destroyed through my own ignorance and cruelty. This young man taught me that talent knows no age, no color, no economic status. Music is the universal language of the human soul, and Ethan Weaver speaks it fluently." The crowd erupted again, but Vincent wasn't finished. Effective immediately, I'm establishing the Ethan Weaver Foundation for Young Musicians, with an initial donation of $1 million to ensure that no child with musical talent is ever turned away due to financial circumstances. The roar from the crowd was deafening, but in the chaos, something even more beautiful was happening. Ethan had found his voice, not just in music, but in life. He spoke into the microphone with confidence that seemed impossible for a 10-year-old. "Music saved my life," he said, his words carrying across the festival grounds with perfect clarity. "Not just playing it, but believing in it even when others didn't believe in me. I want every kid out there to know, your dreams are valid, your talent is real, and there are people who will fight for you." The festival ended that night, but Ethan's story was just beginning. 6 months later, he had recorded his first album with none other than the remaining members of Starlight Echoes, who had reformed as Harmony's Voice, with a new mission of supporting young talent. The Ethan Weaver Foundation had grown into a nationwide program providing instruments, lessons, and opportunities to thousands of children. Theo Ellis, energized by his role as Ethan's mentor, had started teaching again, sharing his wisdom with a new generation. Isabella Vega became the foundation's artistic director, ensuring that young talents like Ethan would never face the barriers she had once overcome. Vincent Sterling, humbled and transformed by his experience, had become one of the foundation's most passionate advocates, speaking at schools and community centers about the importance of recognizing talent regardless of its packaging. And Lily Weaver, the grandmother who had worked extra shifts to bring her grandson to a festival, now watched from the audience as Ethan performed at Lincoln Center, having earned a full scholarship to the most prestigious music academy in the country. The story of the 10-year-old boy who dared to ask a band to let him play piano became a documentary film called Playing in the Light, which won 3 Academy Awards and inspired millions around the world. It reminded everyone that talent doesn't discriminate, that dreams don't recognize barriers, and that sometimes the most powerful music comes from the most unexpected places. But perhaps the most beautiful part of Ethan's story isn't what he achieved, but what he inspired in others. Thousands of children have found the courage to pursue their dreams because a 10-year-old boy refused to let cruelty silence his music. Music programs have been established in schools that never had them before. Young artists have been discovered and nurtured because people learned to listen with their hearts instead of their prejudices. Today, Ethan Weaver is 15 and already being called one of the most promising pianists of his generation. But when asked about his greatest achievement, he doesn't mention the awards or the acclaim. He talks about the letters he receives from young musicians around the world who found their voice because he refused to lose his. The lesson of Ethan's story is simple but profound. Talent doesn't ask for permission to exist, and neither should dreams. In a world that often judges by appearances, that dismisses potential based on prejudice, true greatness lies in recognizing the music that lives inside every human heart, regardless of age, race, or circumstance. Sometimes the most powerful performances happen not in spite of rejection, but because of it. Sometimes the greatest music comes not from those who have everything, but from those who have been told they have nothing to offer. And sometimes, just sometimes, a 10-year-old boy can change the world simply by refusing to stop believing in the power of his dreams. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that talent deserves recognition and dreams deserve support, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe that music truly is the universal language of hope. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove the human spirit can overcome any obstacle. Because in the end, we all have music inside us waiting to be heard. The only question is, who will have the courage to listening?